Hi, I'm Chris from airwindows, and I am digging deep into my strange early algorithms to bring you two plugins called Highpass and Lowpass. Now, you might think, what is so special about a high pass and a low pass? The channel EQ on the DAW will quite happily do that. Well, maybe so, but there's a little bit of a difference. My high pass and low pass are based on low order IAR filters and are very simple compared with the overbearing complexity of some EQ algorithms, cookbook EQ algorithms where it's doing all of this complicated stuff. So they're kind of raw, but they're also using a peculiar trick involving interleaving sample. Well, probably the easiest thing that I can do is to simply show you. Let's turn on a test oscillator. Now here is my low pass. You'll notice there's this soft and hard control. You're not going to see a result from that on the chart. It's more of a textural thing. But you'll notice that if I start dialing it down to 0, you didn't see that coming. Now, I didn't design the algorithm to do that. It just kind of does it. You can see it's trying to roll off everything, but it's retaining this sort of presence area by the way the algorithm works. Again, that's not exactly designed to do that, but it's one of the effects that it has. And that is the reason why you can have things like, forgive me for shuttling this all over the place. Here's a rock track. You can hear the highs there. You're getting a certain amount of clarity out of it. Now bear in mind, this is not a complicated algorithm like with a whole special section just to add that to it. I find those don't usually work very well, having the complicated extra stuff. It's like, let's add some complicated extra thing to bring the high frequency lift and then to sound like the output stage of the SSL HAL 9000, whatever. This is a super, super simple algorithm that just happens to have this behavior. And some people might try this behavior and go, oh, this is no good. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. That's not a low pass. But there might be uses to this. And this is what the raw algorithm sounds like. Although, see that soft hard thing in there as well? And by the way, when this actually comes out as the VST, you're going to see a wet dry control on there as well. But if I set it all the way to soft, note the difference in texture on that kick drum there compared to, because this is, so low pass and high pass do a peculiar little thing that's kind of like frequency modulation or something. It's difficult to describe. Again, it's a very simple algorithm, but it's not your usual algorithm. It's an early airwindows thing, and you know how that goes, right? Let's compare that with putting it all the way to hard. We're getting a different quality on these as we change them. And going to both of them tends to exaggerate the depth of the effect. Let's go to this track called Alien Kittens. And dial it this way. So we're rolling it off a little bit. Now here's how the soft and hard affect things. You got this sort of full pillowy quality on the lows there. And then that gives a little bit more punch in there. We can throw in this one as well. This is what it normally sounds like. We could take some of the highs off of there and then start fooling with soft hard. That's really altering the tonality of things. Definitely softening right up. And then as we go to hard, it'll do this. Yeah, with this guy we can really hear a bit of that tonality. Again, this is no alteration, although it's still not normal. Then as we go to soft, and this is just barely on the highs here. It's really softening the high frequencies here. And then we can harden them like this. So the way this works is the IIR filter is being driven differently depending upon whether the sample input is loud or quiet. And that's what soft hard does. It's changing the cutoff frequency as it goes. But I've just demonstrated. You just heard what it did. That's not the only thing though, because we've also got high pass. Now remember how, let's kick this right out of the way. Shuffling things. Remember how low pass does this funny thing where it's retaining the extreme highs? Well, high pass is kind of like that, but sort of inverse, and that has very striking characteristics. It makes it not the same kind of thing as low pass. Low pass works in this sort of way where it's going to hang on to some of your extreme highs, and then you can really doctor the tonal quality of what you're putting through it. But high pass has a whole other bag of tricks going on. Again, it goes from low frequency to high frequency. Look what happens to the extreme highs as we push this up, because remember, this is the inverse of low pass. This is being used exactly the same algorithm, but out of phase with itself. Voila. See over here? High pass has a quality where it can kind of trap in the tone that you get. Here, just for laughs, let's put this over to pink noise. Brown noise would be even better, but yeah. And by the way, if I say brown noise, I don't mean that you're going to poop yourself. I mean brown noise as the noise generation algorithm. Well, you know something, I think I can actually demonstrate that. Just a second. This is kind of like a brown noise algorithm. This is the airwindows noise generation for the purposes of creating brown noise, and what that does is it lets extreme lows through. I believe I can set low shape in such a way that it'll maximize this. Let me fire that back up again. Yeah, this noise generator, it is able to cut stuff off, but then I can crank it up like this, and there's a real fullness to that. Now if I add high pass to that, you can see it dropping right off. And the extreme lows are in there, but then you can make them kind of go away. However, I'll tell you what, that is a little distracting, so what we'll do is, it's not the easiest thing to work with. We'll go back to our utility plugin of the test oscillator. Go to pink noise. You can see that's a different spectrum. You know, the Logic doesn't offer what I have with my noise plugin. That will come to VST2. But what we've got with the high pass control is the ability to cut off the lows as we go. And as we do that, it's also canceling out the extreme highs. It gives it a sort of, I don't know if I would say transistor radio quality to it, but we can affect all of this quite strikingly. And as we make it more extreme, this high pass also restrains the near Nyquist area. And again, this is not what you get out of just cookbook EQ algorithms, because those are designed to do exactly what they're supposed to do in the box, even if it requires doing a bunch of fancy math and sounding not very good. But low pass and high pass are not normal algorithms. They're the kind of algorithms that the math guys would just throw out. They would be like, well, but it doesn't work at the high frequencies, and so therefore it's no good. Well, it sounds good. And as such, let's listen to what it has to offer. Oop, wrong thing. On some of this music. Like, for instance, this one's got a lot of lows in here, right? Well, if we include the high pass, you can hear how it's kind of trapping the sound in. It's not a super steep attack there, but it's capable of dealing with this kind of thing and controlling the extreme lows. But you can plainly hear it's also stepping on the super highs a little bit. It just brings it into a sort of little box, makes it more controllable. This would be suitable for instance, a heavily distorted electric guitar, where you don't necessarily want to have a lot of crazy fizz going on up there. And you can really exaggerate the heck out of it. And then, when we have the loose and tight thing getting involved, one effect is it is going to bring a little more lows in there, but as we have loose going on, it's got a little bit more swing down there in the lows, even though it's still being high passed. take this and, for instance, be listening to this low frequency kick here. And that's what it would normally be. This is it switched off. And then when we high pass it, we still have some of the character of it, but it's not swinging as much of the lows as this. Like we've got this going all the way up to here, and then we can control it real nicely. Now then if we switch it to the other side, tight, and again this is just an interpretation of what the algorithm does. This loose tight control is basically a thing that the algorithm can do applied positively or negatively. And it's not so much going and figuring out like, oh, how do I make the algorithm go loose? It's more about, I've done this with this very simple algorithm. What did that make the sound do? Because that's where things get useful and interesting, is not spending hundreds of thousands of lines of code to model some kind of whatever, but doing something interesting and useful with sound, such as this crazy little high pass that has the sort of high frequency restriction quality to it. Adding stuff like our loose tight control, and again, here's loose. Style it in so that we can get a little bit of this kick, but not all that much. There, that's tightened up. I'm going to switch it to tight. See, I had to lower it a little bit to get the low frequencies back, but then when I did, they had a lot of extra physicality to them. We'll dodge that back just a little bit. And that is a low frequency swing that could be really useful. Then loose, sort of a more throbbing effect going on. And of course, high pass can be used on all different kinds of things. Here's another example. This has all kinds of low frequencies going on. Let's dial this in so that that heavy kick drum in there has a sort of more swinging, throbbing effect by going to all loose and then just sneaking this up from there. Or better still, let's try to get that impact going by high passing the whole mix this way, but then just sneaking this up until it's restraining some of the highs. And remember, when you use high pass this way, it's also controlling the extreme highs a little bit. So you wouldn't necessarily want to use this on the whole mix unless you're just really liking what it does. Like that. And again, this is high passed. And then without it. It's a little overbearing. And then we can control it. We can pull it back even from that. Now you can plainly see how it's suppressed well. That particular track is not generating all that much information way up there anyhow. So let's go to this one and see what this one's like. and we'll try to listen to what the difference between the loose and the tight control is on this music, maybe making it a little less just radio-like and bright. That's with the lows being able to sort of swing a little bit more, whereas that has a more folky quality to it. And then just a normal like that. Pretty decent little kick drum in there. So this was Lowpass and Highpass. They're strange little plugins. They really are. The way that they interact with the Nyquist frequency is kind of odd and obscure. And I think normal developers would never allow people to have them because it'd be like, oh no, it's not low passing properly because it's still leaving some stuff behind. But trust me on this, when you have an algorithm that is that simple and it has some quirky side effects to it, sometimes it's real interesting to sort of get in there and see what the audio does when you do things with it. Like here is, let's just fool around a little bit and see what we get out of using both of them at the same time. And then we're suppressing the extreme lows there. I mean, suppressing the highs there, but letting the extreme lows through. And then we're going to trap them in with the high pass a little bit. There's all kinds of interesting stuff you can do with these voicings. They're not anything like normal EQ plugins, but you can do things with them that you can't do with normal EQ plugins. And they have a sort of immediacy and sonority from the very simplicity of their design that's not present with just any EQ cookbook design, the normal DSP type things. I just feel those are designed to give mathematical results, and often the amount of processing that they go through, it's losing a certain amount of the sonority and whatever. Whereas something like this, we'll throw that in there. We're retaining a lot of the same qualities of the music, even while trapping in the tonality in this way. Like, there's all kinds of stuff we can do with this. Again, this is what we started with. Hear that there is this real liveness and character to the sound they don't necessarily get by just throwing on some kind of bandpass, channel EQ out of the DAW. And it's entirely because the algorithms being used are, on the one hand, they're unusual algorithms, but they're also very, very simple and don't run a million calculations on everything. I just feel that that is to be perfectly honest, I didn't understand this when I started to work with it. I was putting together algorithms and they were sounding really good. And part of it was just they were very simple because that's what I knew how to do. And I went and reevaluated lots of these things because I was trying to do stuff like um, reduce aliasing in clipping algorithms and stuff. I made stuff a lot more complicated. And I found that it lost some of the mojo, it lost some of the quality that I had come to get used to. And so, some years after going through that learning process, I started going through and dialing everything back and simplifying that. And that's where the Purist line of plugins came from. The Purist line are some of my Forpay Kagi plugins, but they were dedicated to finding these algorithms that did interesting things but were so very simple. Highpass and Lowpass are good examples of that in that they're very early, they're very simple. You can see them in their simplest form here, and that's what I'm working with right now. But when they hit VST, you will also see a dry-wet control because that just has all kinds of uses, honestly. But they are sort of the platonic ideals of certain kinds of designs. Just like the platonic ideal of a gain plugin like this one is a single multiply kept as simple and undoctored as possible. These are simple IIR filters with a couple of peculiar twists, and they are kept as minimal as possible, just so that you can have what you heard, which is that sonority and texture that doesn't get overridden with just, DSP Cookbook Digital EQ overprocessing. These are Audio Unit and VST plugins. They are for free because I am supported by Patreon, or working really hard at being supported by Patreon. Go and check it anytime, and you can see how much I live on. And, how that does has no bearing on whether I'm going to continue doing these free plugins because I've decided that that is just what I want to do. That is how I want to live my life, whatever of it that I have left, old gray-bearded man that I am. And Highpass and Lowpass are free to use, especially if you're even poorer than me. And I really hope you like them.